Give me a moment with your friend. I've never been on trial for my thoughts before.
Welcome to the Only One Mic podcast called Gerard, Brooklyn Dre. Just me is not here today. We're here with documentarian, producer, executive producer as well, and director, Duncan Sill. How you doing, Mr. Sill?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for that warm welcome.
Oh, much deserved, much deserved.
Yes,
So
sir.
we're talking about your new documentary, One Paycheck Away, and this is highlighting poverty as well as food insecurity, pretty much across the nation. Am I safe to say that, Duncan?
Yeah, yes. I think those are two key issues, but beyond that, it's not just about poverty. It's not just about food insecurity. A lot of those things people associate conventionally with people who are working poor, but as you may well be aware of, we're sitting around today, a lot of middle class and even upper middle class people are experiencing the same things, and we're seeing a lot of unfolding right in front of our eyes, things we didn't expect or wanted to see.
Definitely. So what I want you to do, Duncan, is if you can just go back, give us a little bit of your background here. Like I said, you are a director, have been producer on several projects, executive producer on several projects. I know that you were heavily involved within the film industry and making policies and all, but I want you, for our listening audience, to give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty much, for lack of a academic description, I'm pretty much an outcast, misfit, oddball, and filmmaking is my way of telling stories about really sharing my life experience or other people's life experience with other folks. And this particular project came about after I've been involved with community efforts throughout America, throughout the United States for several years in the capacity of development, working on policies, while still involved in the film industry. I became really jaded several years ago, just seeing the unwirling of world events, people having heightened anxiety. And this is prior to the pandemic. And certainly we know how the pandemic has affected a lot of people. But in many ways, the pandemic accelerated the unfolding that I was already seeing on the local level. A lot of communities that have been affected by the lack of opportunities, losing grips on the status quo trust that they had in the system. We've all, for the most part, grown up. Everyone is telling us to play by the rules. You gotta, just do the right things. I've certainly felt, I shouldn't say trapped by that to some extent. I've always been sort of on the outside, the outlier. I never, I could never really sit still in a 9-to-5 job. So I always just had multiple things going on. I just figured it out, however easy or difficult that it might be. But in the last few years, I started to notice that no matter where I was, it could be in the Ninth Ward in New Orleans. It could be in a wealthy suburb in LA. A lot of the shared experiences, people were getting more anxious about their stability. I wanted to do something about it, but I didn't know what. And I think a lot of it too was because of my being jaded. I'm still jaded, so don't get me wrong. It's just it's just this different gradation.
Right.
But I took a hard look at everything, review what I've done. I mean, I wouldn't say, I've done so much, but I've done enough. I've always been cognizant of how people live, how people are trying to make ends meet. But the phenomenon of how this was permeating a collective society was daunting to me. And I realized that the only thing that I could do about it at that moment was to tell a story about what the average person is experiencing from a raw, honest perspective from that person, not from an academic, not from experts saying blah, 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 blah. If we only change this, or we only have, this type of money feeding into certain programs, everything would be fixed. We have seen enough of that. That has not worked. So I started to research a little bit, and I came across a lot of stats and report on how there were over 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. I was like, there's no way. That's a lot of people. That's 260 million people off the top of my head, right? But I started to drill down a little bit, on the info, and I mean, at the end of the day, we could sit here and argue about that, but the reality of it was that there was enough to tell me that a lot of people were being affected by that condition.
Do you think that it's like a systemic thing that, that we all are going down the same path? Or do you think it's like something that we do to ourselves, being like we're living above our means? Or do you think it's like people just not understanding money as far as like investing and saving money? Did you come to like some sort of conclusion as to why? Or
yeah, you bring up the combination of the issues that are affecting it. And over time, it becomes more complex because we just haven't dealt with it. So starting from, what I was mentioning about being conditioned, or the echo chamber, that we house ourselves in wherever we might be, or whatever socioeconomic or background we come from. A lot of times it's about doing the right thing. Right. You got there's a path that's prescribed, and we take it for granted. We never question it. Until something happens, because we've been lucky enough that we've made it this far.
Right.
But but looking back, it really isn't that far. Our continuity really was based on the fact that our country wasn't as adversely affected by World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So. But before that, as you all know, one of our key characters in the film is Aaron Dixon. He was a former captain in the Black Panther Party, right? So he's got plenty to expose and convey. But you all know that. He came of age, as a young person in the 60s and into the 70s, and now, he's in his 70s. And still fighting the same battles. He acknowledged to me a while ago that he can't believe that he's still talking about the same
conversation, right?
Same conversation for years.
Yeah. And it's not like people haven't tried, right? Is that somehow, you raised the good framework. It's not a straightforward, we just do this one thing and it's solved. It's a combination of self-responsibility and systemic structural issues that have been established, or perhaps we allowed it to establish. We never really... we're hearing more and more in the recent times about equity and diversity and all that stuff. But the bottom line is for the most part, most of those narratives goes back to the same old status quo conversations, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's the same thing you brought up about poverty. Poverty is an enterprise. Most people in America who are decision makers want poverty to remain.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because they make a lot of money out of that.
Right.
Right.
It's not, and I'm not saying this to be funny,
Right.
but it's a fact. I mean, you look at the value added, the vertical and the horizontal integration in industry that support the enterprise of poverty. My God, it's big business.
It's big
Poverty
business.
is big business. I'm going to say this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell friends of mine that, we're having a straightforward conversation. I always say that, African Americans and Hispanics are like the rabbits on the food chain in economics, you know what I mean? So like you said, if people aren't being incarcerated, if people aren't, living in these kind of conditions, then a lot of these things wouldn't stand. The judges wouldn't make the money they make, the correction officers, so on and so forth.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You all know that, from, maybe referring to the material. I spent a lot of time in Louisiana. Louisiana is the most incarcerated damn state in the country.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to curse.
I got you.
But it's like, that's the only way to describe it. Right. And people make a lot of money out of it.
You're right about that.
And the thing is, it so happens, right? There's a direct correlation. It doesn't take an expert to notice this. There's a correlation why the state of Louisiana is consistently the worst in the nation for poverty, food insecurity, the things that you were mentioning. There's a parallel. I don't know where you guys are, physically, but I'm currently in the state of New Mexico. We're consistently 49 and 48, in those categories too. It's sort of, we compete with Louisiana and Mississippi. These things.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know they're saying like during that time of Katrina, the problem with Louisiana, FEMA, according to FEMA, when people were wondering why they didn't get money and everything like that, like everybody else did, they said a lot of these people didn't have bank accounts to even transfer funds into because it was so impoverished.
Well, that or even the chain of titles, right? Even if they were living in a family home, supposedly, that they have occupied all their lives in multiple generations. But for some reason, Grandpa, when he passed away, the title wasn't transferred properly.
Right.
So FEMA is going to deny that claim. Wow. So you have all these people living in conditions impoverished by a natural disaster, through no fault of their own. Right. And policymakers and decision makers, we're going to help. It's all about ribbon cutting or getting in front of the camera. Katrina happened 16 years ago. We're still not shored up. And of course, in between now and then, you have things like Hurricane Ida, other named hurricanes. That stacked, right? So that's just one example. But what's been happening, going back to what I was articulating, why I'm so jaded, is that, and going back to the point y'all raised, is that we have been conditioned or somehow defaulted to the modus operandi that all these other things, it's beyond our control. It's too big for us to deal with. I'm just going to, hunker down and, focus on my own, right? But the more that we do that, I'm not saying not to do that. There's a balance, but it seems that our default mode is to consistently do that all the time. And our nation, especially, and it's happening all over the world, it's not unique to the United States of America, is that we have fragmented the connection that we have with communities. Even the term community is problematic from where I'm sitting. I'm that jaded.
Right.
I asked somebody, recently, what do you mean when you say community? They just throw these words out there.
Because the truth is, Duncan, we don't really have community in this day and age. We have neighborhoods, but we don't have community. And it's a difference. It's a vast difference between the two. So I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and so we try to find a way, that difference. We try to find some way to justify it, right? That we pretend that neighborhoods are communities, right? Or a bunch of people somewhere, it's a community, right? Somebody, a group of people yakking online is a community. No, that is not community. Well, maybe I'm just crazy.
No, it's a term that's loosely used.
It's
a loosely used term.
Yeah.
Community usually has culture, all kinds of things involved in it. You know what I mean? We don't have it anymore. It's done.
No. No, I mean, maybe we never had it that, in the sense that it's supposed to.
Right. You're right.
I certainly don't recognize it.
Well, I was going to say in the sense of we grew up in Brooklyn, New York. You know what I mean? So, we grew up with a lot of different cultures, and I don't think community ever really played a part in it. But I do think that we had some sort of, I don't know if you want to say a neighborhood or something like that, but I think it's even gone far away from that. I think at some time or another, we knew everybody in the neighborhood. We knew, some of the police officers. We knew, the elders and stuff like that. But I think even now, I didn't think that was completely community, but I think that it's even worse than that now, I should say.
I think you're absolutely right, because neighborhoods, all label communities, oftentimes it's just a place for us. For the most, I'm not saying this as a blanket statement that it applies to everyone and everywhere, right? But but for the large extent, which is where the problem is, to a large extent, is that we are living in a facade. Our connection is only conceived because we don't have real ties as a humanity. I'm not saying this to be all abstract, but I feel that way. I feel, maybe I'm just so jaded. More recently, I feel that I don't belong anywhere.
Can you elaborate on that? Can you go on?
In terms of just having a peaceful way of being, where I feel that I may have a connection to a place or people, it's all a facade.
I actually kind of feel what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. So it's kind of weird that you're verbalizing it. Now I'm thinking in my mind, wow, that's actually pretty deep thought.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm an orphan, being kicked out of a boat.
Right.
Anything like that. Maybe if that happened to me, then I'll have an excuse, right? But that's not the case, right? So, I went to school for whatever reasons. I just even though I never really belonged to any groups per se. I'm probably that guy who were all goth and hung out by himself, that you see in movies.
Right.
I never went to any of my graduations. There's, sometimes I wonder, how I'm not a psychotic serial killer or like that. Right. But, but I navigated, I made ends meet, I had jobs. I went to college. I had folks I associated with. I don't have a whole lot of so-called friends. I know people, but they aren't really my friends.
So do you feel like keeping that circle small like that keeps you a little bit more focused? Because, what you're describing is not really a bad thing if you really think about it. You don't have a bunch of people around you. You just have what you have.
Yeah. And wherever I might be. I lived in, a lot of different places. And I think that comes from my, probably my background where the context of being a filmmaker and a storyteller. And so the documentary itself, plays, more, now, with the characters in it and the way that I'm offering the narrative and interpretation is it has the tonality of a walking nightmare.
Right.
So I'm inviting people to step into this nightmare with me. It's not, it's not an easy thing. For some people, it's going to be uncomfortable. For a lot of people, it's uncomfortable for me. But I have a strong intent and sense that this is what I need to do. This is what I'm doing. No matter what, I need to go through this nightmare, with these people. It doesn't mean there's going to be a solution at the end of that tunnel when we come out of it, right? There may be something else.
Right.
People are like, okay, well, it may be a rabbit hole. Well, so what? I'm going to go through it. You all with me? Then come. If not, go and stay in your own whatever community. And so I'm not looking to, this is not one of those projects. I've done other film projects. This is not an endeavor that I need to get notice. I don't need awards. But I want genuinely to engage people on the local level, wherever he or she may be. Right. A lot of the characters in this project right now, I met them through circumstances. A lot of it was serendipity. I didn't start out, looking for the former captain of the Black Panther. Right. He's just one part of the narrative. One part of Americana that has a lens into why we're in certain conditions right now. The other characters also reveal something, about who we are. We're always a composite, right? It's not, it's not a one size fit all. It's just, a lot of things that we might be seeing and experiencing right now is always telling us, okay, you fit into this little bubble here. Right. And that's just not reality. No one is that.
I find it interesting. I can often refer to the subjects in your documentary as characters. Is it because of their different aspects that they bring into this documentary? Yeah. Like, can you explain why you?
They have different characteristics and attributes, and most of them, came about through some sort of not necessarily breakthrough, but awareness that their status quo conditioned existence didn't work, and they are all working and middle class folks, and in different regions of the country. The primary focus in the film, in the project itself, is based in New Orleans and Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have other folks, in different parts of the country, in California, in Seattle. I even have I have a family in Scotland that's part of this. But their common background, their context, is that they, at some point in their lives, realized that something that they were doing needed to be questioned completely. And so their events, their things that they go through. And actually two persons in the film project, I don't want to go into, too much of the detail. Right. As we were doing this, they had life-changing events. I mean, major life-changing events.
Yeah, I think a lot of this would force you to look at yourself, financially, and because I've done that in the last couple of years, even to the point now where I watch family members make certain commitments or take certain loans out and stuff like that. I'm like, you don't really need that. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of it for us, especially as African-American people, I think is systemic. But I think also on the other hand, is a lot of times it's like just being here in America, we just want stuff. You know what I mean? So no matter what it is, we got to have the biggest house, we got to have the biggest car, and I think that causes us a lot of problems.
It's funny that you mention that because, Duncan, you mentioned about self-responsibility. Like we have a lot of the problems that we have are systemic, yes, and a lot of it is, based upon policies and all. Things that might not be favorable for us. But you mentioned self-responsibility. You know, is that kind of where we on the line with this? Is like in terms of just governing how you spend money, what you do with money? Like, what is your thoughts on self-responsibility?
Well, I think that, financial self-responsibility, certainly is an important aspect, of livelihood or balanced livelihood, but it's not the only thing in life.
Right.
However, when one is put into a position where, as you mentioned, we're conditioned to maybe equate success or self-worth with
things,
acquisitions, right? With
right.
Having things, status. But once that particular framework is no longer stable, or we don't have means to achieve that, we get all bent out of shape,
right?
So the self-responsibility oftentimes has to go way beyond that element. We hear a lot of talks recently, especially coming out of the heights and the impact of the pandemic, about mental health, right? Now, everyone is offering help with mental health. Well, it's like, what are y'all talking about?
Right.
Are you're not really helping.
Right.
They just, it's like community, right? Now it's now, we're aware that everyone is stressed or anxious. Well, part of how we've gotten here, even without the pandemic, at some point, this was going to come to the surface. It's just the pandemic helped us. Right.
Actually, I think it did, like you said, it did great, because I think it forced us to stay home, get an opportunity to relax. And I was going to say earlier, we were talking about how you feel as far as like, as far as how you feel personally, where you don't have any peace and stuff like that. It's like, but I think that where I think that comes into place is there's no more time to relax. We're all on social media. We all, we got so much stuff around us that keeps our mind constantly going, where you never get the opportunity to sit down and read a book, relax, pray, whatever it is you do, you know what I mean? So
you don't, you said that you grew up in Brooklyn. I don't know what neighborhood.
Crown Heights.
Yeah, Crown Heights.
Yeah. Crown Heights, Park Slope area.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Well, I mean, you look at, how, when you grew up and what Park Slope is nowadays.
Right. Oh yeah.
Two different worlds, man.
Two different worlds.
Two different worlds, yeah.
Right. And how did it get that way? And
gentrification.
In between then and now, you mentioned gentrification. Gentrification is a form of violence. Gentrification is about displacement. There's no ifs and buts. There are all these people trying to justify, well, if we don't have gentrification, then nothing ever gets well, you don't improve with gentrification. Gentrification is about neocolonialism. It's about displacement. And we have done that not only in the urban centers. We're doing this in rural America. That is part of the issue to propel and catapult divisiveness in our country.
Well, I was going to say too, it's like it's funny that you should bring that up, because going to Brooklyn now, I've always liked New York. But what happens is now when you go to New York, our old neighborhood isn't our old neighborhood. The culture is gone. You know what I mean? The Spanish restaurant, the African American spot that was here, or even Italian, whatever you want to have, it's all gone.
Right.
So even now, if you go to our old neighborhood, like it's replaced by Chipotle and all of these major organizations that where it doesn't even seem like where we grew up anymore. It seems like our whole area is gone.
Yeah, and part of it was to transition into who's going to be able to pay the rent for these places, right? Or to warrant serving the new clientele. I mean, within the gentrification dialogue, there's new buzz and rationale now. Well, don't blame all the hipsters, who are moving into our neighborhoods. If you blame, the developers, and well, hold on.
Yeah, it's hand in hand.
The developers are not developing in these neighborhoods in such a way if they don't understand the demographics they're trying to serve. They have algorithms and marketing tools, and they know, who they're catering to. So what you bringing up about that self-responsibility.
Right.
I'm not going to go into some place, realizing that I'm going to displace someone by my actions. I just can't do it. I won't do it.
And when these people come in, and again, I don't have an ounce of racist bone in my body. I love every race of people. But I say this as noticing gentrification is that when they come in, not only do they take over, they remove all the culture out of the neighborhood. Everything you could think of that we used to, enjoy.
They replace with something that's appropriated. Oftentimes, it's not real. Again, it's a facade, and when you live in a bubble and a facade like that, it's not sustainable.
Right.
It's not real. So part of the attributes, the characters, who are in this film too, they also bring an element of inherent culture to their stories. So for example, without going into a whole lot of details, because I'm still shaping, part of the story, that the key person I work with in Louisiana, the last time back in May, I was able to. It was Easter. It was around, on Easter. We were able to go back to her hometown in a rural community in Louisiana, where she grew up. It was hot that day. I'm the first one to be like, man, I need air conditioning. But the thing is, that day, the time that I spent with her, and she took me to meet her dad, some of her whole old hangouts, she showed me the old record store, which is not, there anymore, where she and her sister bought their first album. It was Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Right. Right.
So she was telling me about how, when they were little kids, how they just dance and, do all this stuff. The culture is still there, for them, right? They, even though that they don't have a whole lot, but all of a sudden it made sense to me. This is why she is that way, in doing the stuff. I hope you guys will watch, the movie and some of these side projects that are coming out. Actually, I may be shaping something that's uniquely, with her in Louisiana about housing, about gentrification.
I'm
going to call out.
Oh, that's something that would be beautiful right there.
Yeah.
But you could see why she is that person, and that's what I want to convey. They're real people with real hearts and souls. And somehow we lose that link. We lose that connection. What happened?
Because it's weird. It's like you go into the neighborhood and you're like, I'm looking at it in, our old neighborhood. I'm like, wow, it's clean. It's nice. The police are here now, but I'm like, what happened? Why wasn't this done when we were here? You know what I mean?
And it should have been.
It should have been.
Yeah.
Not to mention, like things that I don't drink anymore, but as a child, we drink liquor and stuff like that. And we was getting locked up for drinking in front of our own building and stuff like that. But now there's Caucasian people sitting outside, just having a nice bottle of wine and alcohol, whatever they want. And
because it's a $300 bottle of wine, man. What are you talking about?
In front of a place that costs you about $5,000 a month.
Right.
Well, I just saw something. Isn't it? Well, Brooklyn is like more expensive than Manhattan nowadays.
Brooklyn is the new Manhattan now.
You mentioned Park Slope. Oh my God, I could imagine.
Yeah.
It's in Manhattan.
The former mayor used to live in Park Slope. That's just, it's crazy.
Well, and the thing is, like, somehow something allowed it to happen that way. Do we say, oh well, that's just whatever it is, or do we consciously, when that's why I want to share these stories, right? with these folks and maybe, with y'all, who may be interested, or some of your friends and family, and start talking, amongst ourselves and say, hey, well, what happened? And then what do you want to do? I asked 2 questions in this film, and I'll disclose that right now, because I'm going to ask you in the beginning. I'm going to ask those 2 same questions at the end. Mm-hmm. First one is, what does it mean to be human now? Second related question, what kind of life do you want to live? It's not abstract.
Right.
No, it's not.
But it's the most difficult thing you're going to answer for yourself.
Because a lot of people scratch their heads on those 2 questions right there,
Right.
Because in some cases, most people don't know. They have no idea.
Well, it's kind of like what you said before earlier. It's like, I think with the way things are going now, with, the way we live life, it's like, if you ask somebody to, pinpoint what could bring them peace right now, I don't think many people can say, what actually could bring me joy and peace right now.
You don't even know what joy and peace might be.
Right.
Right.
Because they think that joy and peace may be having a whole bunch of money so they could go on an expensive vacation.
Right.
All these billionaires out there, buying yachts that are building rockets to go to Mars or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then what?
And then what? Right.
We're going to gentrify Mars too?
Yeah.
If they could, they would, Duncan, believe it.
Well, that's what they want to do.
Somebody's thinking about it,
That's what they. Well, I wish those guys, I'll name them too. Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk, and those. They should just go ahead and hurry up and go to Mars and never come back. I don't want to see this anymore.
but I think it goes to show you, even with him, it is no peace. I think. Didn't he get divorced like some time ago? I'm like, how do you get divorced from, Jeff Bezos? You know what I mean? Like, this is like the perfect life. You would think that would be perfect. And like you said, money doesn't bring everything to you.
It doesn't. But you look at McKinsey, his former wife, right? She's giving a lot of money away, right? That's how she's, I don't know her personally.
Right.
But to me, that could be just a gesture of redemption. She does all these. Okay, it may feel like, okay, it's $1 million to this nonprofit. $1 million doesn't do shit anymore. And then what?
It's nothing. Yeah.
You're back in the same old. And then this organization going to look for the next person to give them $1 million.
Right.
Does it undo the displacement in your neighborhood in which you came from?
Nothing.
None of that should happen.
Yeah, nothing.
They tell me one neighborhood that it has occurred. That they have taken a conscious effort to reintegrate, to regenerate life in a way that it does not result in displacement.
Exactly, because I like the term you used, the neo-colonialism, because even when you look at it, it's like I can liken it to like just blowing the nose off the Sphinx. Right. It's going to destroy everything that made that area to the point here. Like, it was a story that I seen in New York Daily News. And these guys owned a store that was there for like years. And then next to that store was kind of like a vacant lot with a big wall next to it. They woke up the next day to find a full mural painted on a wall that was next to their store. And when I tell you these guys were pissed, they were pissed because they said, nobody told you to do that, first of all. Your idea of beautifying a neighborhood that's been the same way, the store's been the same way for years, and what people are used to, your way of beautifying it is like almost taken away from that culture of it. You know, and they were saying like, who gives people the right to come in and just set up a garden somewhere or set up or paint a mural on the side of a building? Something like, if I painted a mural on the side of the building, Duncan, I'd be arrested for vandalism. Yeah. But this is supposed to be lauded because, it's a picture of a flower or something. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. They get, it makes the news, everyone is, they have an after party where they break out the $300 bottle of wine. They could sit on the steps, right? Right. At what point does that vacuum, that void, that emptiness, I have no other way, and I'm going to be completely front and center about it. It's just the folks who are engaged, participate in those scenarios. And perhaps at times in the past, I've been guilty of it too, right? Mm. At what point do you recognize that my life is so empty, so void of essence, that I need to go justify, with these actions to make me feel like I'm worthy.
Right. Mm. Like stepping on another person's neck.
And that's and it goes back to, that's why I'm jaded. I need to face that myself too. It wasn't my intention when I headed into the project. It was really, oh my God, there's 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. What does that really mean, right? I mean, living paycheck to paycheck is not necessarily the end of the world, right? It doesn't mean, because I have a lot of these, for lack of a better term, progressive liberals coming to me. Oh yeah, a lot of these people, they live paycheck to paycheck. They're like one paycheck away from being homeless. What are you talking about? You're living paycheck to paycheck. You have a job. You don't realize that one incident or two incidents, yeah, you may be, 2 or 3 paychecks away before something irreversible that you're going to experience. And you're kind of like, okay, well, these poor people. No, look at yourself.
Yeah, you haven't figured it out yet. You're one of us. You know what I mean? You just might be a little better off. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. I may not be, that person, who is buying groceries with my EBT. It doesn't mean that I'm much better. I just figure out things. Before a few years ago, I did a short documentary called Somebody Next Door. It's about food insecurity in the state of New Mexico. I gave a snapshot, and what I want, as I was doing that, I realized that I needed to, actually go out there and see what the real story was. So I intentionally spent a couple of weeks trying to make ends meet at the equivalent of what people were getting in SNAP. Mm-hmm. Right. And I needed, to make sure that I was healthy. And I figured out a way, to feed myself in the equivalent of that money. It wasn't easy. Mm-hmm. But it took some planning. It took some discipline. For a lot of folks out there, you got to get up early in the morning, get clean, get prepared, go to a place at work. You may or may not like your work. A lot of people don't like their work.
Yeah,
so that's the other thing too, about this project. It's going to expose that, well, what is the relevance of a lot of the work that we do? Mm-hmm. A lot of times we just justify that because we get a paycheck. And it's not an anti-capitalism statement, because that doesn't really solve anything, just, capitalism is bad. Well, what's behind capitalism that is bad, versus, all these other isms, right? It's not a battle of ideology. At the end of the world, the basic fundamental needs that sustains life is pretty simple, right? It's nutrients, from substance, right?
Shelter.
Shelter. Healthy place. A lot of fundamental issues in America, in our nation. Well, actually, in a lot of the world can be addressed. It's not going to solve everything, but the foundational issue is the safe place, safe, healthy place for people to go home to.
It seems like in this documentary, like because initially when I heard about it, I was thinking maybe that you were coming from the perspective of what you can do financially as far as like investing and all the other stuff like that. But then now I'm looking at it from this side and I'm like, wow, that's kind of deep too. But it seems like, do you think this could be more like a series kind of like documentary? Because you can dive so many places. I'm
going to focus on a couple of major things. And then the intention is really have these related projects. As I mentioned to you, I already have a related probably a 1 hour public broadcast, because initially I wasn't thinking about PBS.
Right.
Right.
There's certain elements that are appropriate. So the food insecurity part of it, the housing opportunity, as I mentioned, housing is such a critical component of everyone's life. I mean, you have people who choose not to, have shelter. That's fine, but that's not the majority of the people out there. I don't know about you guys, but I like having a roof over my head.
Thank God for it.
Exactly. And it shouldn't cost $4,000 a month, right? It should be
got that right.
Right. And you're about it should be in a place where I feel like when I go outside, I wave to someone across the street. It's real, it's genuine, it's a real wave. Right. That I know that if I walk down to a neighborhood restaurant, it's real, authentic food. It's not leave gentrified, cuisine.
Right.
Well, I'm not paying $80 for burrito.
Well, it's funny that you should say that, right? Because initially when the gentrification started, I would say about maybe, 10 years ago, maybe, I started seeing that when they were coming into the neighborhood, way before they started franchising the Chipotle and everything like that, is that they would buy the old Jamaican beef patty store. Mm-hmm. And they're telling you that it's authentic beef patty Jamaican food, but it's really not the guys that sold this food when I lived here, you know what I mean? And it tastes nothing like,
Yeah.
That's
what I'm talking about, because the food that's being served, right, or where they even took the time to go on and get the ingredients, right? Because a lot of those local eateries did that. They actually went shopping for themselves, right. So they hand pick the
right ingredients,
protein, the vegetables. They know where it came from, and then they took time to prepare it.
Right.
It came from here, man.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it was like they may not have ever made any fortune out of it, but it was worth, from here, it was worth something beyond just fucking money.
Right.
That's why you went there.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
And you have those memories of those places because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And where are they now?
Right.
Gone.
What happened to people sold, right? Where are they now?
Gone. It's amazing. Like you said, too, even in regards to housing, and you were talking about how it's so expensive for the housing. At one time or another, I remember my mother, we lived in Brooklyn. I think they might have paid $350 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. And they paid it for years. And they were under Ed Koch and rent control and all the other stuff like that. And I think I looked online, and when that apartment turned into like a condominium, a co-op?
Co-ops. Huh?
And this is like 10 years ago. They sold that apartment for $750,000.
You can imagine.
An apartment that we paid $350 to live in, you know what I mean? And that was when we left. So we left in what?
Like
the 90s?
The late 90s. Yeah.
The 90s. So from the late 90s until maybe, and I'm quite sure it sold, for hundreds of thousands before that. But I mean, it just went crazy. I just happened to look on the internet and saw it went from 700 to some odd thousand.
Well, yeah. And you look at, initially when I was researching and looking at, okay, there's this thing called the wage gap, right? We are aware of that or now, recently. So there's two bookends to that. So most recently, because of everyone's attention and experience about inflation, one of the justification that we're hearing from policymakers and experts out there a lot. Oh, well, a lot of these companies are having to pay higher wages to get workers, right? So they're like, oh, yeah, on the average, we're seeing 5% increase. And well, first of all, that's not keeping up with the current inflation. You know, we just saw 9.1% increase in the month of June, right? So with that said, wages have been stagnant since the late 70s and early 80s in America.
Right.
I don't know, you know, when you guys started to work, you know, maybe in the 90s or, you know, 2000 or whatever it is.
80s, yeah.
Right? But I know that I knew it was bad. I didn't really want to like figure it out because I would get like really depressed.
Right.
But I mean, that some of it, people may be saying, okay, that's your own choice that you choose to be this oddball, you know, crazy storyteller, right? You should have, you know, gone the corporate route and be a doctor or something. Right. So I look back at, okay, when, you know, I had to get a job, you know, when I was graduating from college. And now, you know, I have things that I balance, you know, I'm living one paycheck away myself, right? I'm doing, you know, projects like this, but I also have to go out and find ways to make a living.
Right.
So what I'm making right now, you know, adjusted for inflation, is actually 30% less than when I graduated from college with no experience.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the average cost of a new vehicle in America right now is $47,000. People, you were talking about paying $300, your mom paying $300 a month, right? For a two-bed, right?
Right.
The average monthly payment for a vehicle right now is $700.
Mm-hmm. And that's before car insurance.
That's before car insurance. And putting gas in the damn thing.
Yeah.
But you better just park it in your driveway and just look at it, man. Just take a picture and post it on Instagram.
Because you can't do nothing with it. You can't do anything with it.
Well, that goes back to what you were talking about before about the whole check to check thing, because that's what people do. They go out and buy. I worked in banking for a long time, and I was working in the collections department, and it's amazing, especially for people who you're looking at their income and you're like, this person doesn't have any reason to have this vehicle. You know what I mean? I've seen people with $1,000 car payments and don't make anything close to that should be your car. And then a lot of times it's not even that the car is expensive. It's because they had an issue with the other car. They had to put the over-under into the car in order to get out of the deal and get into a new car. So it's a lot of stuff.
Vicious cycle, right? When you do that.
Vicious cycle.
And what you were saying too about, you know, having that modus operandi that we believe that we're supposed to be upgrading all the time. Right. You know, we're whether it's a girlfriend or
whatever.
Well, whatever it is, right? You know, a vehicle or you know, a townhome or whatever it is, right? You know, and then we kick the bucket, and then what?
You pass it on to the next one.
Pass it on to the next person, and in the meantime, between then and now, what have we done? Most of the time, we've probably done something bad. That we weren't even aware of.
Yeah. At bare minimum, you just haven't enjoyed life. You probably work 2-3 jobs, you know, in order to keep up with the Joneses. And, you know, it's just ridiculous. So I totally get it. You know, it's crazy.
So a lot of it, you know, I mean, this project really it's opening a whole can of worms. It's really one paycheck away. And there's still, you know, part of that narrative developing. Really, one paycheck away is a metaphor for our life experience. Some of which it's an ugly mirror that we hold up, but we want to turn the other way. We don't look at ourselves.
So in regards to your project, Duncan, before we get ready to wrap, who had the most impact on you thus far within your experience of making one paycheck away?
Oh, I would say it's the woman in Louisiana, Andreanica Morris. She's unwavering. She's honest, not for the sake of dedicating her life to be ambitious. You know, and like I said, going back to her hometown. on Easter Sunday told me a lot. I mean, not just told me, in words, but told me in a sense, this is her being. This is why she's doing, she actually works in the housing opportunity space since right after Katrina. She had, she worked with thousands of people, not only in the state, but nationally.
Okay.
Right.
She's unwavering, like, I mean, I look at her as like, I don't know how she does it. If I've been knocked down that many times, I need drugs.
Right.
I need something to keep me going. I'll be just saying, this is not worth it. I'm walking away. She's not walking away.
It's that resilience.
She's fighting this by herself, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to this day, yeah, she's a genuine person that you want to root for.
I see she has a big effect on you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, I see the passion when you talk about it.
Yeah.
Well,
when you guys see her, when you guys listen to her, man, I'm nothing compared to her, man.
We got to get on the show then.
Yeah, we would love to have, and again, I think that would be a nice conversation for us to just, we've been talking about gentrification, and I would love to be a part of that piece and, taking you to Brooklyn and, that kind of stuff.
We should all meet up, there. And actually, if you really share, we'll get you guys on camera, tell your story, man.
Yeah, I would be interested.
We'll
definitely be interested.
I think, the good thing about stuff like this is that you connect with folks out there, who like you guys will have real experience. I want to share something, because I hear that you have a story you need to tell as well.
And I think the good thing about it, and like you were talking about the woman that you were expressing, how much you feel about her, it's just like, it's objective. It's not like a negative, we hate people or anything like that. It's just like, my neighborhood is not even my neighborhood anymore. Where I grew up does not exist. And the sad part about it is, in I guess the 60s, the 70s, they had redlining and all the other stuff like that, but they don't do redlining no more. They just make it so unaffordable that you just can't live there anymore. As of right now, in our old neighborhood, there really is barely any African-American people in the neighborhood. They are there, but those are those that probably are still under rent control, and they're just waiting for them to die off or, something like that in order to get them out of those apartments and stuff like that.
All right, we lost Duncan, unfortunately, due to a technical issue, but we still want to encourage you to please go to onepaycheckawaymovie.com to get more information on Duncan's documentary. Also, you can reach the Only One Mic podcast via Instagram and Twitter at the Only One Mic P1, Facebook and LinkedIn at the Only One Mic podcast. Also, catch us via email. You can send us an email at theonlyonemic00@gmail.com. There you can leave your comments, thoughts, whatever you want to leave, you can leave it there. Also, we thank you again for your time and encourage you to please speak your truth quietly and clearly and listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant, because they too have their story to tell. So until next time, please keep in mind that we never had to run from the Ku Klux Klan, so we shouldn't have to run from a black man. Peace.
Peace.